All right, folks. What's up? Today's the 10th of December. Oh my gosh. No, it's not. Today's the 10th of January, 2025. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. This is In the Image Clothing Company podcast, where we have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ. We have three sides to In the Image Clothing Company. Our main side, we address the human body. That's what we are. We're called a clothing company, but for the sake of clothing being the thing that's actually placed physically on our bodies at all times, but really what we're doing here is allowing the body to work. The body only does what it does. It doesn't matter about the fat content or the musculature, because at different times in our lives we have different amounts of those things, but the body's just about leaving the skeletal system in its natural foundational position. Then everything can hinge the way it's designed to and pivot and rotate and just do what it would do if it was unaltered. But human beings are different than like animals. Not just like animals, they are different than animals, because animals don't have anything placed on them besides them, and human beings almost always are wearing clothing, to the point that we alter our bodies by doing that. Anything that is not centered, when our bodies have a center line on our earth that just pulls us straight down, is going to alter our bodies. And yeah, so anyway, we understand here where clothing needs to sit, and this is, something I'm going to talk about within this episode here as well, because this is episode 35, titled 1000 Times, and I'll get into that. But the pants that we wear need to be entirely above our hips, because our hips just need to open. The pelvis has so much going on within it. The legs come into there, the spine comes into there from the other end, and the pelvis has rotations and all sorts of things. The pants just need to be all the way above the hips, and they need to be slightly higher in the front than in the rear, because our core needs to stay activated. It's the center of our whole body, and it would just always be naturally activated. But if there's anything placed on it external that's pulling it out of its only natural position, it's not going to just do its only natural function. So slightly higher in the front than in the rear for the waistband of our pants. And the tops that we wear, the seams on top of our shoulders need to sit behind that little bone that's up there, because that's the other end of our collarbone. So that allows our shoulders to be in their neutral position, except for button-up shirts like what I'm wearing here. It's different because there's a band of material, and so it doesn't actually sit behind with a singular seam, but that whole thing is essentially just a seam, and it's behind your shoulders. And then right at the very edges for the edge seams of the shoulders. Now, let me discuss our two prerequisites as In the Image Clothing Company. Our shoelacing technique, where you can find wherever you find us. Included with that is just to tie your shoes evenly on both sides over toward the inside to create an even foundation traveling up the rest of your body. And that'll just allow your feet to be unaltered. And the second prerequisite is to remove all tags from everything within clothing, even in the shoes, because they're either affecting the dorsiflexion or plantar flexion of your ankle, or the gripped arches that are naturally there within our feet. So that's what we are. We allow the body to work. Now, this episode of the podcast, I'm going to talk about something. We talk about the gospel of Jesus Christ here at the podcast. And, gosh, dude, I mean, this is a big one. I know that it's really common for people to be very offended. And let me be very clear, myself as well. I was going to say myself in the past, but myself at any time. I'm just a human being. I'm always just what I am. We're sinful by nature. We're actually equals, even though that's hard to see at certain times and within certain people. But it's the truth. We don't get to decide what's true, but our God is the truth of all things. So, yeah, that's why we are In the Image Clothing Company. We're universally designed in the image of our living God, Jesus the Christ. And it's so common for us to get so offended about people saying that things are typical, or things are predictable, or let me say this and then give a little context, because this episode is going to be a lot more than just this phrase taken in this way. I'm going to relate it to all the things that I do within this. But if you've ever heard anybody say, like something will happen and they thought it was a predictable thing or actually was or whatever, and they will say, "You've seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times." Basically, something that just gets played out by people again and again and again, the same pattern, the same behavior, the same reaction. It's like the same every time. I've seen that before. It's the same thing that I saw last time. I'm not shocked by it. I don't care, whatever. I've seen it once. Well, I've seen it 1,000 other times, basically, is how you can phrase it like that to understand what that means if you don't. Now, that's something that can potentially get very heard wrong. I mean, you can get so offended by that. If somebody tells you that something you did or said or the way that you acted is something they've seen 1,000 times, that can make you feel so insignificant, and it can make you feel so like you don't matter. But this is something we all got to hear, and I've talked about this a lot within the podcast. Once we realize how little we matter, that helps us understand how much we're actually loved by our God, because he doesn't need us for anything. He's perfectly almighty, but he still cares about us. And so that really is what that does, actually, is understanding how little we actually matter and how small we actually are, and how the problems that we have are things that people have seen 1,000 times, and they're not unique to us. And the reactions we have to things are things that people have seen 1,000 times, and they're not things that are unique to us. What that does is actually help us understand that we're more understood than a lot of times we have the potential to feel, because everybody's the same. We are individuals and we do have uniqueness in our ways, but we're just children of our God. We're just human beings coming here to do what we come here to do. And it doesn't matter if that was 4,000 years ago or if it's today, meaning the date that I'm filming this or whenever you're hearing this, which could be however many amounts of days past now, right? I mean, that's why it is what it is. You've seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times, because we're all here just to experience what we're here to experience. And it's just this earthly life, and it's just set up how it is. And a lot of times, if we don't have very much experience with hearing other people's experiences, then we feel like we're really alone, and what we're going through is something that people could never understand or relate to or, even care enough about to matter. But that's just not the case at all, whether you want to believe it or I. It doesn't matter, because the truth is truth. And once you start to talk to people and branch out of your environment that you've been used to, you'll see that everybody is the same. It doesn't matter if their upbringing has looked entirely different, or if they're on a different part of our earth, or if it's a different century. We're just human beings. And once you can start to understand that phrase, it helps you, even if it's somebody else saying it to you, because we all need to be able to internalize the truth. And that is the truth, that everybody goes through the same things. Now, here's the thing is, it doesn't matter when it is. This is what I talk about within, where clothing needs to sit. I've heard people say, that, well, and it doesn't matter about what people have said within this at all, but, I've heard people say it as well. But what I'm saying is, I'm one of the people saying it, right? It's not just some kind of fashion thing for certain times in history or certain times in, certain trends. Clothing might sit above the hips or whatever for the pants, or wearing shirts that fit you or this or that. I mean, you've seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times, in the sense of, I was just watching this movie downstairs. It was just on, and I happened to be in the room and in this house, right? And it was like an old Western United States of America movie, and within there, these people were wearing their pants above their hips, and they were also wearing shirts that fit them the way that I describe and discuss that they need to. And it's funny because I came into this pretty ignorant, this whole company that I founded, because I came from living in modern 2020. It was 2024 at that time, but just the 2000s and 2010s, now 2020s, and it's been so common for people to wear clothing oversized for a lot of that time. And I came into this company very ignorant about how clothing needs to fit because I was wearing oversized clothing myself for years. And it's so cool to see that though. You see these movies about people, decades before you were even alive, or, films that were centuries before you were alive, in the sense of they were like they're portraying that time because, we didn't really have video cameras that far back, but I mean, just what people actually wore back then, you see that, and they wore things the way that I discussed they need to. And that's the thing is there's no opinion on our end. I always say, don't believe me about anything that I talk about in the Image Clothing Company. Even in my life, I say that with the people that are around me because I don't want us to believe each other. I want truth for everybody and, myself. So here's the thing is, that's what I'm saying is every conversation that I could ever have with anybody and any kind of opinion they could have about what they think with clothing and where it needs to sit or how, much they are attached to wearing their oversized clothing or whatever. You've seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times because, I mean, this was decades, centuries ago. People were wearing clothing and their bodies actually worked when their clothing was where it should be. So it's the same for everybody, man, forever. I mean, that's the thing with our God is he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so with our problems and stuff that we go through, dude, I mean, we can get the potential to think that we're so unique and we're so like in need of help in ways that nobody can understand. I think a big thing is don't focus on trying to get a human being to understand you, because I felt so misunderstood all my life. I still do, and I am, and I always will be. But the point is, I'm a disciple of Jesus Christ, and we're just very different than the world. And so, don't try to get human beings to understand you. And when people say stuff like that, that's what's kind of the paradox about it is that's normally what they're saying is they're saying those words out of being understanding. Because they're like, no, everybody goes through this. I've seen this 1,000 times. You're not unique in the sense of don't get so down on yourself. You're just a human being. We're all the same. So that's the thing is if you take that phrase for as it is, as it actually means and what it really is, it's on the end of kindness and understanding when people say that to you, because that is what they're saying is, no, I mean, everybody goes through this. We're all just here to experience the same things. And so, but this is within anything in life because of that reason, so it is crazy, man, because I know a lot of times, because it happens generation after generation after generation, our parents go through things and the world looks slightly different when we're going through it, like our parents didn't have the internet. For a lot of us, depending on how old or young you are, but like at this time period, the date that I said, the internet's only something that's even existed for somewhere around 30 years, give or take. I mean, yeah, a little bit more, but just, it hasn't been very long, man, at all. So, I mean, we have the potential to think that nobody could understand what we're going through in our phase of life if when they were in our phase of life, the world looked different. But it doesn't matter how the world looks because it's about what we're going through. And I mention this when I talk to people, a lot of times I'll say stuff and people get offended thinking that I'm talking bad about them, but I'm talking about a behavior they have. And maybe I was somebody who was acting out of that same behavior in the past, and it's just the behavior's not a good thing, no matter if it's me going through it or acting out of it or anybody else, The behaviors are the things that stay. The experiences are the things that stay. The emotions are the things that stay. The dynamics and the relationships are the things that stay. The problems are the things that actually stay. And the world can look a little bit different, but we're still just human beings. And so it doesn't matter if somebody seems like they could even understand your situation because maybe they've never been through it in a way that looks exactly the same to how your understanding of it is. They can still say that whole thing. I've seen it 1,000 times, man. I mean, everybody goes through this stuff because what can happen is you can be, like within a certain type of occupation and doing something and experiencing things that you feel like nobody understands. And somebody else can come up to you and try to sit there and console you, and have a conversation where they're trying to comfort you. And they can tell you, like, look, I understand. And you're like, how could you? That's what gets said. Like, how could you understand? You would never know what I'm going through. And I've said those things. And nobody's within us. Nobody's actually us. That's the whole thing about, yeah, we are individuals to a degree, but we're all going through the same things. And we might have different reactions within us to those things, but the dynamics of the stuff's the same, man. And people have had experiences in stuff that's so similar because even if they've, in that example, never been in the occupation you've been in, they've been in similar dynamics and had to overcome the same thing you have, even if it looks a little bit different. So I think it's so beautiful to be able to see that that's really the end that's on, is it's an end of understanding. It's not people judging you and saying like stop complaining, but it's like an invitation to stop complaining. As in, don't feel so down and bad about it because you're not alone in it. That's really what it means. And that's how it is, man. I mean, we're not alone here. And what I was saying, what I always say, and it's not because Evan Strong, me, is saying something. Don't believe me about anything. But I'm always talking about how, you know, we shouldn't rely on any human beings. Even the people that you trust and that you love and that you know are there for you, don't rely on them. Rely on God because He's above them, but He's also above you, and He's above anything that we could ever have happen in any of those situations or things or dynamics or problems that we could experience. That's the whole point, is that's why the gospel is what it is. I mean, it is the truth of all things. Don't believe me. But no matter where you go, and this is the most beautiful thing. I mean, this last Sunday. Today's, I guess, technically Friday. Technically, I mean, it is Friday. I just mean my sleep schedule. I haven't been sleeping like at night and then waking up in the morning. It's been kind of inverted a little bit past few days, and so yeah, I think it's Friday. But when I went to church last, it would have been 5 days ago, whatever it was. I was realizing, and I've thought about this and I've known this, but it was hitting me hard. It's like anywhere you go on the earth, the church is the same. Because anywhere you go on the earth, the gospel is the same. And the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, don't believe me, but it's the true church. Again, I don't even currently have my records within the church. So don't believe me, but I'm saying that. Now, yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful for what I've been given. Again, the mistakes that I've been allowed to make, to be able to say the things that I am and have the perspectives that I do. And that's the thing, man, is a lot of people get it so mixed up where I talk about things and I'm, talking out of experience about my mistakes, and people take it to think that I'm trying to sound like I'm better than them. But it's just what's happening is I'm owning up to my mistakes, and that gives them this perception that I'm better or trying to sound as though I am, when all that I'm doing is admitting how terrible of a human I am. It's a very backward thing, but that's the whole point. Again, I mean, you see that behavior, you see it 1,000 times. Everyone's always trying to tell me how I'm trying to think that I'm so much better than them in moments when I'm explaining how sinful I am, and how much I'm messing up. And so it is really weird. So the gospel, though, is the same wherever you go, all over, everywhere, and forever, So, but the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, especially because it's the fullness of the truth, you go anywhere on the globe and it just looks the same, and I haven't really gone much any other places up until this point on the globe besides pretty close to right where I am now. But even in that case, going to any other church building and meeting with other people who you haven't met with before, it's all the same. It feels the same. It's the same structure and it's the same spirit of our God, but also the people's problems are the same. The people's family dynamics are the same. And economical things that they're talking about, and the problems that are going on the same earth are the same no matter where you are on it. So yeah, yeah, man. I mean, you've seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times, man. But it's an encouraging type of way. It's on the end of understanding and being that way toward people, and it just gets taken wrong. I have that song that I wrote, "Kindness for Weakness," where I say, "Take my kindness for weakness and see what happens after that," because a lot of things just get misconstrued, which just means misunderstood, but then like taken in the way that, is not how it is. I mean, a lot of times people tell us things and say things to us, and it might be some kind of passing phrase that they've said quite a bit or something, and we can get the potential to get very offended about it, but they meant every bit of kindness out of it, and if we don't understand it, but it's something that they've just seen and seen and seen, we can take it however we want, but we don't get to decide what they said and what they meant by what they said, and that's the thing, man, is people just get in this whole thing where they think they know everything, and the people that get told that they know everything are the people who are that know that they don't, and it really is a very backward thing, but that's the gospel, man. That's the gospel of Jesus Christ, the gospel of paradoxes, the truth of all things. Now, I think it's, this is a good thing to mention. It's like animals, the behavior of a cat because you've seen cats before. It's kind of like that whole thing, you call a spade, and that's something I was thinking of doing a whole podcast episode titled that. This is like a month or two, probably 2+ months ago, I was thinking about doing a podcast episode titled something like that. But if I do or don't or what, but that's what I'm saying in this as well. If there's another episode about that, then cool. But you call a spade, meaning if you're looking at something, you call it what it is, and you don't get to interpret it this and that and those things and all this stuff. And so what I was saying about the cats is like, the behavior of a cat because you've seen them before, or a dog, or a certain animal that lives around you. Animals are much more instinctual than humans, and how they're going to react. Just about can predict it because of the events that are taking place and what's going on around them. And so that's the thing, is just you just know it. It's just you've seen it before, and so there it is. You know what's going to happen. And that's just how these dynamics go within human beings. Whether it's within your romantic relationships, your family relationships, or who's playing their parts or their roles or what. I did an episode of the podcast titled Being Real, and I just was mentioning within there, I was actually episode 34, the last episode that we had before this one, of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. And I talked about how we all just have our roles to play, and that's what it is. The cat's just a cat, and you know what a cat's going to do because they all do such similar things. Every species of animal acts very, very similar, but within that species, they do have their slight differences in their personalities. And that's how human beings are, really so similarly. And we aren't animals, but in so many ways, we're very, very similar. And that's how it is, So, I mean, yeah, you can tell, man. You can tell how people are going to react to something without even knowing them, but you can pick up on cues. It's like, you can see somebody that you've seen for the first time and basically know them because we do just play our roles. There's like a few types of people across the globe, and it doesn't matter if you're, this color or this race or this ethnicity or this age, or again, what time period of this earthly existence it is. That's just how it is. We have our roles to play, and you can get to the point. Anybody has the potential to get, well, I mean, I think people have higher potentials to get better at certain things than others, I mean, without saying I think, I mean, that really is how it is. But everybody has the potential to get better at stuff, and we can all, get a better understanding than our current one of being able to see this within people. And it really helps because it's just there. It's just the truth. You don't have to believe it or what, and you can't deny it either. We really do just play our roles. And So it is cool. I mean, like sometimes I'll like in the past, I got like a new place of employment. And while I was there, first day, like you see some people and you're like, I know you. You've never met them, but you've met people that are so similar to them and they just have just about the exact same behavior. Because really, in that case, that's what it is. You've seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times. But people take that and take it to think that they're like so much less unique and they don't matter now because you're saying there's somebody else just like me. But really, that's what you're wanting, is to know that you're not alone. There's a line within, I reference Dallas Jenkins' TV show The Chosen quite often, and there's a line within there where Jonathan Rumi, who plays Christ, says, I don't know exactly the dynamic of who he was talking to, but he's like, he told them that they're not alone in misunderstanding. He's like, you're not alone in misunderstanding. And then he like went on to explain what he was talking about. That's how it is. And that's how our God's looking at us in everything. He's like, look, you're down there thinking you're so alone and thinking you're so like one of a kind, but you're not alone in misunderstanding your situation, because there's a lot of people that you even commonly interact with that are going through something so similar to you and they think they're alone in it as well. Like, just don't worry about it. That's the whole point, is we pray to our all-knowing God. Not I'm not trying to tell people what to do, but don't go around trying to get people to understand you, because whether they do or they don't, it's not going to fulfill the need within you to be understood. It won't. And that's what everybody's saying, is they want to be so understood by people around them in the ways that they want those people around them to understand them. And so, I mean, that's something we're never going to have, because we can't decide how people understand things or not, And so our God is above all, man. And he really did set it up that way. That's the thing. I mean, he created warthogs to be warthogs and giraffes to be giraffes. And animals are just what they are. And he created within his own children, us human beings, certain roles that we will play and that we are and that we can't change. Because that's what I was talking about within that episode, the last one, 34, on being real. I was mentioning how we don't decide who we are. We only just discover and fulfill who we are. Fulfill meaning settle into who we were created as. And that's really how it is. We all have these roles to play here, and we're just here to do it. And so it really helps, because what that'll do is help you understand yourself, is to see other people. It's huge. That's really big, because I think that's what happens is when we feel so misunderstood by people, it's usually that we don't understand ourselves. And the only way we're going to understand ourselves is by knowing who created us, which is Jesus Christ, because he created us as we are. And so that's how we understand who we are. And so that's what creates that behavior for people feeling like they're so misunderstood, is because they don't understand who they are. That's why we point people to the gospel, just because it's the truth of all things. You don't have to believe it, but then you'll have understanding once you know it. And so, yeah, I mean, we have roles to play, man, because, if we didn't, it's like, because I've thought about this a lot. I've talked about this, I don't think on the podcast necessarily, but, I mean, well, no, I guess I kind of have in certain ways talked about this on the podcast, but, people, it's like, I as much as I could be capable enough or even maybe overqualified in ways to do certain occupations, just meaning what I'm saying is there's certain things I couldn't do, even if I was entirely qualified for. It couldn't do in the sense of it wouldn't mesh, I mean, I couldn't be somebody sitting behind a computer doing like that kind of work, even if I was totally able to. It's not what I am. It's not who I am. And it just wouldn't work correct. And so that's the thing, in order to have everything that we have, the people that are playing all the roles that are allowing this earth to just do what it does and our world to function and be structured the way that it is now, everybody has to just be what they are. And so that's why, you see, I mean, you can see people, sometimes you see someone and you don't know anything about them, but you just see them out there in public, and it's like you can tell. It's like, yeah, you're a like a garbage man, aren't you? You're a mechanic, aren't you? You or like on the computer end, it's like you're a programmer, aren't you? Like for computers. And you can just tell, because that's what I mean. You've seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times. People are just what they are. People just have the roles that they play. And it's not, I mean, because there's a difference between trying to be something and then just like, that's just who you naturally are. And that's the thing is, when you really know just the truth, the gospel of Jesus Christ, you can go up to people who do feel so misunderstood, and you can just tell them so much about them, and you've never met them. And there's ends to that, because the Spirit can speak through you, and you can be told exactly what to say and how, and that can be what's happening. But in addition to that, just on the end of like being open to just seeing this place as it is, and knowing, it's like, no, I've talked to somebody just like you before. And I've seen somebody in the same situation as you before. As alone as you do feel, this isn't unique. This happens. And in fact, it's supposed to. And that's the other thing is if things weren't happening to that extent where you can say that phrase, you've seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times, then we wouldn't ever really fully be able to help each other with very much, because that's what allows us to help each other, is because we've seen the situation, whether it's within our own personal lives or people around us, and we understand it more than that person currently does. And so it's a good thing that it's not so unique. Because, yeah, I mean, the more unique you want to be, the more alone you'll feel. And it's important to say you can't be more unique than you just are. So, I mean, man, that's really what's going to help us all, man. And that's really what's going to relieve a lot of what's going on, is just realizing we aren't as unique as we think. We're really not. At all. Like, nowhere near how unique people get to thinking they are, and but that's what makes people seem unique, is those people who see it as it is, because a lot of people just don't, and it's, I mean, that's the thing as well, though. I mean, people play their roles, like I'm saying, and my role is to be just, well, what I am, right? I'm not going to try to label it as something, but as I've gone through my life, I've been somebody who's just always pointed out things that people didn't quite see. But, I mean, I grew up just kind of looking for things as they are, or looking at things as they are, because a big part of it was being around people that I was never going to change, regardless if I wanted to or not. And you just have to accept things for as they are at that point, because you're not going to do anything about it besides drive yourself crazy by trying to change something you're not going to. And there's certain things that we can, be the vessel to be used in helping change. But yeah, man, I mean, I just, I remember just looking at people, and it is funny, because as much as we want people to like, as much as we think that's what we want, for people to sit there and like cry with us and tell us, "Oh, I know how terrible it is. I can't believe you're going through that." Really, what we want is for someone to tell us the truth and say, "Dude, look, sure, it's tough, but hey, guess what? You're not alone in it." That's what that saying means, is that you're not alone. It's like, I've seen this so many times, because I mean, when you see movies and they write things like that, that's how it goes, It's like somebody will be sitting there and think like they made a mistake, for example. I mean, even that, like, we're not alone in our sins and in the fact that we mess up. We're equals. We all mess up. And you'll see somebody, and I'm thinking of like movies, they write this a lot and stuff, someone will be sitting there like, you know, thinking they made the biggest mistake, and how can anyone ever forgive them, and nobody else messes up like I do, and everybody seems to know what they're doing, and I'm always the one that's, whatever they're saying about themselves, and that's something we all get the potential to be saying and thinking and stuff about ourselves at any point in our lives. But But it's just not the case. It's not actually true at all. Because then you'll get that like mentor figure come over to him and be like, nah, dude, look, man, whoever it is, if it's like an older person talking to a younger one, or a best friend, or a parent, or whatever, or even a kid talking to an older person, they're like, no, I mean, everyone makes mistakes. And see, one time when I was like this, and they'll tell a story, and it's like pretty much the exact same dynamic of what's going on. And so that's where we get to see, at least through like a movie, is like a good way for us to see, if we don't feel like we've seen it in our own personal lives, that's just how it is. We all just go through what we go through, man, and it's just the same. I was watching on the TV downstairs yesterday this thing about India. It was like culture of India. There was, aerial shots that you're flying over, taking video of India, of the landscape and of the culture and things, and and that's a whole different part of the world than here. But a lot of what I was doing was looking at people's clothing, because that's what I say. I can speak for people across the globe without ever having met you, because clothing does the same thing to our universally designed human skeletal system, right? Meaning, right, you don't have to believe me. I'm not asking for it does. And so that's a lot of what I was doing, is looking at, these people, these Indians that are like pretty much across the earth from me, and they're in the same patternings that I get into because of the clothing that I wear if it's not fitting me correct. And so that's the whole thing. You've seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times. That's why I always say, without like trying to make it sound like anything, In the Image Clothing Company speaks on universal truth. Don't believe me. I say it like that because it is what it is. You've seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times, because it's just a thing that has a reaction to something else. It's just the human body that has a reaction to what the clothing is doing to it if it's imbalanced, right? It's just an emotion in these like cases I'm talking about that we don't quite understand, that any human being has the reaction to, at least very similarly, if they go through something that's similar to it. And everybody does at some point, to some degree. And that's like within the clothing patternings. That's what I say. It's like, to some degree, everybody on the planet is in, this patterning. Yeah, but that doesn't mean they're like fully so imbalanced. But anytime you've worn something that's altering you the way that it does, then there you go. Anytime you've gone through an experience that makes you feel a certain emotion and the dynamic looks how it did, then there you go. And, somebody could have been going through that clear over here and you don't even know about it. And you feel so alone, but you're not. That's really what that phrase means. I love that, because I took it on the wrong end for years as well. I was somebody who would get very offended over stuff like that, because I thought people were just dismissing me. But it's actually on the other end. Well, whatever their intention is, can be something different. But taken this way, seen as it is, like that's like the way I'm discussing it, that's what it is it's out of understanding. It's like, no. It's like, I've seen this 1,000 times, as far as like, I mean, a lot of times we'll make a mistake that we feel like we just never should have made. Like, I can't believe I did that, Nobody else does this, dude. And then we'll sit there, like, kind of like how I am right now. Like, this is how I picture it in, like the movie scenes, They're sitting on, like, a curb with each other. And it's like, dude, nobody else messes up how I do, man. If this guy did it, like, he would have done it so right. And everything would have just been so fine. But it's always me. That's what we think as human beings, dude. We put it on ourselves when it's something that's happened 1,000 times to other people. Really? I mean, that's what it is. You're not alone. Like that line from The Chosen. You're not alone in misunderstanding. You're not alone in sinning. But you're also not alone in trying to say that your problems are so unique that everybody should cater to you. Because everybody says that. Everybody sits there and, gosh, myself, I'm not condemning, because I did this so often, and I still do it in ways, and I will always still do it in ways. I'm a human being. I'm not condemning others, but I'm just saying this is a behavior, right? None of us should really be doing. But something so many people do, man, is we'll sit there and be like, think that everyone needs to cater to us because our problems are so unique and nobody else could ever understand. And so we'll just sit there and try to do all that we can to, like, you know, we get attached to our suffering, and we want everybody to, kind of cater to us because our problems are things that we're saying are so unique when just the truth of it is they're not. You've seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times, I mean, but when you are misunderstanding of the truth of this earthly life that us human beings have, then yeah, you potentially feel very, very much singled out, and you're not. I mean, it's like an animal that's hunted by a certain type of other predator, right? Like you've got animals and there's predator and prey. And the predators are the ones that eat the prey animals. It's like one of those prey animals is like nobody else is getting hunted by this. It's like a rabbit and a wolf, right? And this rabbit is like sitting there trying to complain. Nobody else has to run away from wolves and, fear to get eaten every day. Nobody understands except for every other rabbit that ever comes in contact with a wolf. Like, that's exactly the same thing. It really is. And so that's the thing, man, is that rabbit can sit there and feel all alone, or he can understand that he's a rabbit. It's like the ugly duckling. You know that story about the ugly duckling where there's like this family of ducks, and there's one, like there's the mama duck and all the little ducklings, the little baby ducks, and one of the ducks is just the ducklings, the little ones, is so much different than the rest. He doesn't understand why, and he feels so left out. But then he finds out he's a goose baby. He's not a duck baby, and he just wound up in this duck family. Well, that's the thing, is that goose can think that he's so, alone in his problems and in his being misunderstood and things. But, if he were to go talk to any other goose, then they'd be like, no, dude, every goose looks like you. But he's just trying to compare himself to a duck. It's the same thing within the human being dynamics, like I'm saying, and how we have our roles to play. If you're somebody who's in a certain role, and that's just what you're placed here to be in, and you're trying to compare yourself to somebody who's in an entirely different role, we're all human beings and we're all equals. But we are, like I'm saying, slightly unique, but not alone in our uniqueness. Because you being that, like, goose in the duck family, right? There's plenty of other people out there who are also essentially quote unquote geese in duck families. And you and that other goose, right, can relate to each other more than you could possibly ever imagine actually having that be the case. Being able to relate to somebody. But you can just sit there and think that you are so alone. But that's why, again, it's not about that. It's about our God. And knowing that our God created the geese families. Our God created the duck families. Our God created the human beings. He created all of it. And so he understands it all perfectly and how it all meshes with each other and works together. Or doesn't so well. I mean, he's above it all. And so that's the whole point, is just looking to Christ. And yeah, talk about being able to get to a point where you can see things once and essentially have seen them 1,000 times. Our God has literally seen everything, all times that there could be. He's all knowing in a way that we can't understand as human beings. And so even to the extent that I'm at in my current understanding, right? If you're just listening to this episode of the podcast in audio only, I'm putting my hands up like this in a sense of like, I'm not trying to sound like I'm so smart, but really, I mean, I can see dynamics well, but even to the degree that I am, or like, I can still look around and look at my own problems and think like, man, dude, I'm in such a unique situation. And it's not true. Because even if we're pretty unique people, we're still not, like, gosh, there's nobody, I want to touch on this because, like, we look at the prophets in Scripture, or even our modern day prophet, and we look at these people and think like, man, there's nobody like them, man. but they're looking around and thinking that, you know, we're just humans. That's the whole point. We're just all equal. And so anything that we want to try to get worried about or caught up on or whatever, I mean, you've seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times, dude. I mean, because here's the thing is, what I'm saying is there's nobody that's so unique that there's nobody else like them. And that's why I started to mention the prophets, because I think it's a very common thing for people to read scripture and think of these prophets, well, and just see these prophets and see what they are as, you know, really in their sinful nature, human being states, pretty heroic in what they're doing as far as spreading the gospel and giving people truth. But they're just people. Every human being is just a human being until they become a prophet, but they're still just a human being in that role as well. That's what I'm saying. We just play roles. And so, you know, I mean, even within that misunderstanding, that's something that everybody feels. You know, everybody gets into a new position and they think nobody could understand, you know, and everybody's got their first day at their occupation. Everybody's got their first day as a father if they become one, or as a mother if they become one. You know, everybody's got their first day of this or that. Everybody's got their first time trying the new thing, because there has to be a first time if you have done anything. So as much as you feel so out of place, it's now everybody has seen that to whatever degree, and it could have been like 1,000 times. Because that's the thing is, like, you know, you're at a place and people are training you to do something, and you know, you feel like you shouldn't make any mistakes or mess up because everyone around me is so good at it, you know. I just picture like me sitting on a curb. That's what I picture, like that movie scene that I feel like is commonly portrayed like that. You're sitting on a curb, it's like everyone here knows what they're doing and I just don't. And I come in and I mess it all up, and you know, people be saying that kind of stuff, dude, and it's understandable, but that's the point, is it's understandable because everybody has their first day. And so the people who are training those new recruits in whatever it is, it's, you know, no matter how much you're trying to get down on yourself, every single person that's doing this had their first time as well. And I've seen it. I've seen people come through here and I've seen them, you know, push through and actually get good at it and continue on. And I've seen people give up. So I've seen it on all ends, and you're not alone. You're not a unique, and you're probably, you know, I'm picturing that like that tough love, but that's what you need, because that's the truth, is you're not alone, because everybody else is going through the same thing you are. Everyone's got the same complaints you do. Everybody's got the same needs as far as they're still a human being just as you are. And, you know, depending on how much experience somebody's had, to them, they can look at these situations and it can seem like something that doesn't even matter, or like not even something to bat an eye at, you know, something like to not even think about at all. But then the person that's in the situation at that current time might think it's the end of the world. And that's something, you know, out of personal experience as well. Like some of these things that I'm talking about are times, you know, kind of like roles that I've played, you know, in the past, man. Not kind of, I mean, definitely, because definitely, I mean, there's been times in my life where, you know, I thought it was the end of the world, dude, and I thought like, oh gosh, this is it, dude. No, too much, too hard, too unique. Nobody knows. I'm alone. I'm scared. I don't want to talk because people won't understand. And then now there's a lot of those situations I can look back on and be like, dude, what the heavens? Like, that's such an obvious thing to me at my current understanding. But when I, the same person, was in that situation, it seemed like there was no possible way that anybody could understand. And so that's really what it is, you know, is we're here to gain perspective, and we're here to go through things, and we're here to just, I mean, I mention that so often. That's what Christ did, is he came here and he overcame the world. That's what we're here to do. That's what we're commanded to do. That's the point of our life, is to look to Christ, because he was our example who did that first. And we're just here to follow in his footsteps. And so a big thing of what I'm saying within that is, the more that we just look at the world as what it is, and I also mention that scripture all the time, you know, being in the world and not of the world, the more that we can just see that it's just the world, man. I mean, it's just what it is, and we're not gonna be able to, I don't want to say this in a way that's, taken wrong, because I also like that phrase, one man can change the world. I mean, literally, one man who was much more than a man, he's our living God, came and changed the world. But then, in a lot of ways, even in our own earthly doings, one man can have an entirely worldwide impact. I mean, there's, a few names that you go across the globe, and there's a lot of people that would know that name. But really, the reason why they know that name is because they were being, whether they knew who Christ was or not, they were being a disciple of his and acting out of, you know, Christ-like behavior. That's really all it is they glorified Christ. But, I think, yeah, just being in the world and not of, because seeing the world as it is, man, and realizing that you're just one person in the grand scheme of all of it, and that's why it is kind of like a both ends kind of thing, because you can have a huge impact for good, as for the sake of pointing people to Christ, but you can also just realize that you're just another human being, and that helps to realize, because that's the truth. So yeah, me seen it 1,000 times, man. I mean, there's people across the globe going through the exact same thing, because somebody can get off the plane from a whole different continent and meet you, and within like 3 minutes make you feel more comfortable than somebody else who's lived right around you or even with you for X amount of time. And it can be shocking, like, how could you ever have that kind of impact? But it's just because what they have is perspective, and they see that you're not alone in this. The people around you might not have quite the understanding that this person does, but they're just like, I mean, this is just how the world is, dude. I mean, I've just been around, I've seen some things. In the area that I live, it's just a lot different, and this is more obvious to see there than it is here, but it's no different, that kind of thing. I mean, it's just the world, dude. It's just what it is. I mean, that's the thing, kind of what I was talking about with animals, I mean, I talked about how much I love bears. I gotta address this. In one of the early episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, I mentioned brown bears for like one of the first times that I mentioned them. And I said that we have a lot of them in Utah, and we don't. We did in the past, but like past, like hundreds of years back. And then the human beings just, wiped them out of this part of the world. So I was wrong about that. But we have black bear in Utah, not brown bear. But brown bear, I mention all the time, I love them so much. And if somebody doesn't know what a bear is, like how a brown bear is going to react, and they get around one, then they might freak and not know what to do when in that situation. They're not in danger just because they're near the bear. They just, don't know how to react or don't know how to predict what it's going to do. That's the same thing as like somebody who's just has some knowledge about bears just because they have had some experience within, reactions that bears have to things and how they act in their normal life and the role that bears play in the grand scheme of all this. That person is just like, no, don't worry about him. He's fine. I mean, yeah, there's certain things to do and not to do, but I've seen 1,000 bears, right? Seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times. It's like, no, bears just act how they do. And do have their individuality, but for the most part, they're just gonna do the same things. That's what I'm saying, right? It's that perspective and that understanding, that personal experience that really allows us to be able to look at things and be like, calm down, but out of love, People lose their minds over stuff that isn't actually happening. But if we don't understand it, then, it's understandable to kind of react that way. But that's the whole thing, man, is a lot of times we just don't want to listen to people, man, people who have actually been through stuff that we haven't. A lot of times we don't want to hear it, because what we're doing is listening to our fear more than their experience. And no, it's not about listening to people. I mean, don't listen to people, but, experience is one thing about, if they're just talking about something as it is, that's been that way the past 1,000 times, I mean, yeah. So I think that's a lot of it, though, is we just have to go through our own experiences, I mean, it's weird to describe our life like this because really we could entirely live this whole earthly existence as the only human being on the planet, and it could still work for what it's supposed to be, but it's not set up that way. And I want to kind of expound on that because what I mean is don't rely on other people's experiences. I think that's the thing is a lot of people think, they're looking around and everybody else that they see doesn't seem to be going through what I'm going through. It doesn't matter because whether they're talking about it or not, like they could maybe be going through those things or have gone through, but they just don't vocalize it. Or maybe they just really don't know. But either way, that's just like one other human being. And we have to, we it's so common for us to just like place our wants and desires and things of being understood on just one person. And, it's usually the people that we actually oh gosh. I mean, it's the people that we don't want to have to care about, but we feel like we should and need to or whatever. But even that in itself, right? It's just the same dynamic. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Like these, like me with my dad, for example. Growing up, my dad, he's the person that oh my gosh, all I want is him off my back. You know what I mean? For like my whole life, is what I'm saying. Like as a kid, like that's how it always was, and that's just how it is. Like, no, just leave me alone, dude. But he's the person that I always tried to get to understand me. So that's the thing is, it's on all ends of that. I mean, you can describe that as, well, the dad is just playing the role that that kind of dad plays. And anyone can look at that and say, I've seen that once and I've seen it 1,000 times. It's always just, yeah, that's the role that that dad is playing. But then you can look at it on my end and be like, well, you're just that kid who's in the same dynamic with that same dad. And I've seen you as the kid be acted out like this behavior and role, quote unquote, in 1,000 other kids, right? And so it's always just the same thing, I mean, because no matter how much I want to complain about it, because like, oh yeah, I mean, I got so terribly treated growing up, but so did so many other people, right? We go through these things, and because growing up, dude, I felt like what I was experiencing was something that nobody would ever be able to understand, but they can, and they did in the times even when I was feeling so misunderstood. And so, I mean, that's something crazy to think about, even for me, myself, like, as in, like, even right in this instant, kind of, unpacking that for my own self, like, growing up, dude, I mean, my experience, I just felt like it was something that no matter who I discussed it to or with or described it to or whatever, I mean, and as alone as I felt within it, like, I wasn't actually alone in it, dude. I mean, and not even to the extent either. It's not just like, yeah, other people go through stuff, but not as bad as I did. It's like, I know you've been through something, but it wasn't this bad, It's we can't be saying that. That's not up to us to say because we don't know how that experience is actually like the magnitude of it within each individual human being. And so we can't compare because we're not actually the other person, first of all. But then also it's just it really just is what it is. There's so much that's not fun to have to experience, man. And that if we were to be the ones choosing it, we wouldn't have gone through it. But it's just what it is, dude. I mean, we're just here to play roles. We're just here to do what we're here to do. And it goes so quick too, man. I mean, that's the other thing is, people, will kind of, that's the thing. Once people start to realize how short life really is, and that's another big thing that happens is they'll start to be like, dude, don't worry about it so much. I know it's not fun. I went through a similar thing, but it's just life, dude, and it'll be over before you know it. It's stuff like that, growing up, I was get told that by even my own dad, he's someone that's telling me that all the time, he's like, man, no, it'll be over before you know it, I mean, felt like I was just a, whatever age just yesterday, and yeah, I mean, that's how it is, dude, it's just life. And that's what that phrase means as well. When people are just saying, oh, it's just life, dude. Or like stuff happens, Another one of those things, it sounds like a dismissal if we're not seeing it for what it really is, It sounds like they're dismissing us and like, you're not actually caring about me. It's like, it's the opposite. It's one day you'll be able to see this. It's just life. As far as it'll be over, and that's good because then we go home. Really. And that I say that like a similar phrase to that all the time, that's awesome. There's a lot of people that can't really have that level of contentment at their current time because they don't understand the truth of all things. But that's it, dude. I mean, it's just life. So that's what I was saying is that's where those sayings come from, Like stuff happens. It's just life. Seen it once, seen it 1,000 times. You're not so unique. Your problems aren't your own that nobody else can understand. These things, they're not a dismissal. It's actually the other end. It's actually, hey, this is where you're going to find contentment because this is the truth. And, I'm so grateful for this episode of the podcast, dude. I just love the podcast. The podcast is so different in my view of it than other stuff that I do within the company because what I see it as is like other company videos, if I make a video and end up deleting it later, whether it was because of any reason, right? Not just because like I said something wrong and I want to cover it up but I just, for any reason, make a video that was better than the original one, or I do whatever within the podcast. For me, my way of viewing it is like, this is something, I mean, the episodes are numbered. I verbally say it within the episode and I title them the number they are, and so like, they just are what they are. And I love that because it kind of makes it like a place where I feel is like a more solid, like this is rooted as it is. It's going to live on. This episode of the podcast, like, again, not that it's like, holding me accountable so that I don't try to like take back something I said, but so that it's like a place that we can always come back to, a place to see what In The Image Clothing Company was founded on and from and through, and to see my own understandings at certain times, looking back at episodes, as we're forward, like we're on episode 80 at one point, and I'm looking back at episode, well, this one we'll say 35, right? And stuff like that. It's a really cool thing for me to be able to see right now. Is like, yeah, it's something that's always going to just kind of live on as it is, and that's something that is, it's cool because I think a big part of it is, I don't want to, is another one of those, I've seen it 1,000 times. I've seen so many times where people will, start something a certain way and later down the road be doing it differently. And whether it's a good or bad thing or right or wrong for them to, it's just they'll claim that they were doing it that way all along for like the accolades, the recognition, the like, yeah, see, I knew all along. And that's the whole thing is within these episodes, whatever I'm saying, like, well, it's kind of like how I just mentioned how I was wrong about the brown bears being in Utah. I guess the whole time I've been alive, plus much more years before then, there hasn't even been brown bears in Utah, as far as that I'm aware. I mean, I looked it up on the internet and I tried to actually really find out after I said that because I realized like I hadn't actually seen a brown bear in person in Utah in the wild, but like, it's stuff like that. Like I want things to just be as they are because that happens so often, dude. I mean, people will start something like this that ends up getting big. I mean, in the Image Clothing Company, again, for those audio only, I put my hands up, like, surrender. I'm not trying to say something, but I say this all the time. In the Image Clothing Company is going to be huge. It's not for me, not for my recognition, not for anything other than we're helping. We're spreading truth to the best of what we can, sinning along the way. And I know how much it's helped my own personal life, the things that I'm discussing and the things that I founded this company on, right? And I'm just being used as a vessel to do this anyway, so it's just going to be huge. What I'm saying is, I've seen people that once their companies take off, or once their their things get so big, they'll pretend that they were doing what they're now doing that has changed. They'll pretend they were doing that the whole time because like it's working now, so we'll just say this was the plan all along. When like they changed it part of the way through to like something different, like quite a bit different, and no, that's what I'm saying about. I'm so grateful for the podcast for many reasons, but that's one of them, man. I mean, because the stuff on the first day of I titled episode 1 of the podcast "The Launch," and the stuff that I was saying about well, like our shoelacing technique, it's gonna always be the same, and what I'm saying, stuff does, and I just. People change, man, and you've seen that 1,000 times, where people will do things just for the recognition, later down the road, pretend that they knew all along. But I've been so transparent to saying that I don't know. Since the start, I haven't known what's even happening, but I'm just being open to being prompted to do what I'm supposed to do. I know what I'm, you know, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just want to take myself out of it. Like, I don't know. I mean, I know these things are correct as far as wear clothing, but that's exactly what I said within this episode about I came into this so ignorant, not even quite knowing how to even wear my own clothing, like at the very beginnings of In the Image Clothing Company. But, here we are. And now, it's being proven to me again. It's just, it's so cool. I don't know. I love it. It's just, anyway. Seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times, dude. Even the fake humility, how much of that is in whatever. If it's actually there within stuff that I'm saying that I'm not realizing, and I'm trying to be like all seen as humble, but I'm faking it. Like, I'll be able to look back and see once I'm more wise to even decipher my own past behavior. You know what I mean? It's like, it happens, dude. I mean, everything that happens as a human being has happened before because we're just human beings. And we're not so unique, dude. That's beautiful. That's crazy. I mean, that's how we have to see it. It's because that's how it is. It's such a freeing thing. It's such a, like, you've been longing for understanding for X amount of time. Here it is. Guess what? You're not unique, But in the ways that we're not, because to degrees we are pretty unique as well. So I don't know, man. I mean, it's the gospel of paradoxes, the gospel of stuff you'll never understand, other than it just is what it is. And it just cycles, dude. But yeah, man. I mean, I've seen it 1,000 times, bro. And I think that's a big thing. Is that's really what helps you. Kind of what I was just saying a minute ago. Like, take yourself out of things. Is the fact that whatever you're gonna say, whatever you're gonna do, even the amount of good that it is, and to the degree, even if you're doing like a high degree of good things for the world, someone else has done it before you. I mean, you gotta take yourself out of it. Like I was mentioning earlier about, we there's a few names that the majority of the people across the entirety of the globe, at least like at this time, would know a few of these names of big figures in history that did some pretty big things that actually did affect the whole globe. But somebody else has done it as well. We're really not, because like it's like what I say when this company's gonna be huge, man, and I'm saying, like, I'm not saying that for recognition. I'm really not, because even if it was at one point, and I don't expect it to or think that, I mean, it doesn't even matter, but like that, and that's not my intention behind saying this at all. But let's just say it was at one point the biggest company on the face of the earth. Well, then once I die or whatever, there's going to be another biggest company on the face of the earth. Like somebody who gets a hit single, and it's like they write a song that's like the most popular song for X amount of time. Well, it won't be. Somebody else will, after you, have the most popular song. And so, I mean, everyone just plays that role. You've seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times. And people who are in, this is a beautiful example. Yeah. And I'm a musician as well. So this is also very relatable coming from me, out of things that even could potentially happen to me. Like musicians, they'll go into some place, and, these people who are in charge of like producing their stuff to people, or however it works, because even that changes a lot over time, how that goes about happening. But the whole like top tens charts of whatever it is at any time on the earth, right? The people who are like in charge of that, or work at the place that determines that, or whatever, they've seen it come and go. They've seen it 1,000 times. They've seen the hype of the person that thought that they did such a great thing by having the hit most song that's out there. And sure, like, live it up, but you're not going to be the one who's always that. I mean, it's just a blip. Just like these emotions, they're just a blip. Just like being in these relationship dynamics are just a blip. But guess what? This whole earthly life is just a blip. Because if we think about it like the animals, like I was saying with the wolf and the rabbit, every rabbit is just a rabbit. To us human beings, we might look around as like, it's just a rabbit. But a singular rabbit looking to another one might assign that other rabbit as like the only rabbit that matters to them. But, to everybody else and everything else, is like, it's just another rabbit. That's the same thing with our problems. And I sat on that for a second because that can be taken so wrong by any of us, myself included. But that's the truth. That's how it is. It really is. But here's the little, like, in addition to that, or like the something that never leaves that's attached to that, is our God. Because, yeah, our problems are just what they are, and we've seen them once, we've seen them 1,000 times, and the people around us can say that to us, and, and we can get thinking however we want to think about whatever we want to think about, but our God doesn't care how many times he's seen something, because, I mean, it's like messing up, and thinking about, like, I shouldn't mess up. Nobody else around me messes up. Well, you know what? Our God placed a single man in a perfect garden, and he named him Adam. And, well, actually, I'm not sure how. I think Adam got named in a way that was, like, a whole, like, story in itself. So, however Adam got named, the point is, there was this man named Adam, and our God created him. The one, just this only one person. The first one, like the trial run, if you will. I want this to be just as real as it is, because he's looking down at this one human being he put on this earth, and he's like, okay, you could use a helper to help you out in this garden. And so then he, pulls out his rib and creates Eve. That's why we call it, flesh of my flesh, rib of my rib, bone of my bone, right? I mean, Eve was created from him. So now our God is looking at this earth that he created, and this one human, and then he made another one from that, and he's like, okay, there you guys are, and, it was his plan for them to make a mistake. And they did. And they partook of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. And so now he's looking at them, and he's like, all right, well, I've seen this before. Now that it's happened, you human beings made a mistake. And so if you want to sit there and talk about seeing it once, seeing it 1,000 times, our God is, well, the king of all, but he's the king of seeing it once and seeing it 1,000 times. You messing up and making a mistake and doing something, or having a problem that you think is unique, or going through something you don't think anyone's going to understand, or whatever, our God understands. So no matter what, if the people around you actually don't understand, because some people aren't very understanding, dude, and that's just the case. That's kind of hard to accept sometimes, especially if you're somebody who's trying to be as understanding as you can. I'd put myself in that category. Even when I don't understand, or even when I am like a little thick-skulled or hard-headed in certain times, I'm trying to be understanding, and I'm trying to understand more as I just, continue to learn. But sometimes there's people around us that just don't understand stuff, dude, because they don't even care to. They just like stuck in their ways and stuff. But regardless of what end it's on, that's the whole thing. That's what I always say. That's